I'm an assistant professor of multimedia journalism here in LAU. Welcome to Beirut. So I know that it has been a few days. Today I'm going to talk about sustainable journalism models or journalism economies. My study is mostly focused on the area that is known as newsonomics, which is the economy of the news industry. So my presentation will mainly be about 4 different categories of solutions for the crisis of journalism industry. So how many of you are journalists or have journalistic background? Okay. So it will be more interesting for the ones with journalism background, I guess. But it is related to everyone because if the journalism does not survive the crisis that it's experiencing right now, it is very possible that the democracy itself, or the liberal democracy itself, is not gonna make it out of this crisis. So my presentation has different parts. I'm going to start with general overview of the industry, what kind of threats and opportunities we are observing, and then I will go to the financial crisis of the industry, how it is being experienced, and I will go on with emerging business models in journalism industry. Then we can discuss, or we're going to see some case studies, and we will discuss if it is going to be enough to save journalism. So I think you all know about what happened in early 2000s with this dot-com crisis. So since early 2000s, digitalization of journalism is going on, and there were too many changes in this dynamic area, but by mid-2010s, so by 2014 and 2015, journalism's crisis of sustainability has become more visible than ever. So most people think that it's a kind of war between the traditional media and the digital media, which is not, okay, okay, sir. Which is not the reality, actually, because this kind of tension between digitalization and traditional or conventional media, yes, it exists, but it is not in the heart of the crisis journalism is experiencing. So there are some ambiguities about the form, about the content itself, and demands of the consumers. What do readers or what do viewers want on this kind of stuff? And there are too many discussions about it in academic and non-academic spheres. And both traditional and digital-born news outlets are either firing or laying off their employees, or they are going bankrupted. So from BuzzFeed to Guardian in last couple of years, a lot of big news outlets laid off hundreds of people. So it's a big crisis because journalism industry isn't the biggest industry that you can see. So in a classical factory in many industrialized countries, there are more people than people working in the journalism industry of that country. So journalism industry is a narrow industry, but it is very effective. That's why we are discussing a lot about it, and because of the social outcomes of this industry's existence. So there are too many statistics today which are used to understand the financial value of the news media. So you can look at the clickability or shareability of the stuff, but mostly people are looking at click rates or sales rates of the newspapers. But it is not a secret that most of the newspapers are buying the copies they printed back, and they are manipulating the number of their sales. So this kind of stuff are causing a lot of problems in terms of the credibility of newspapers and their value for advertisements or their value for political parties or any other corporate institutions that exist there. And then during this transition from digitalization, outlets experienced harsh budget cuts and good old days of big reports, big teams have been replaced by multifunctional reporters or multifunctional individuals who replaced some big groups. Maybe we can say it is thanks to the technology, but it is not only related to the technology. This precarious environment in journalism has roots somewhere else. So what are the leading problems? So financial, political, and technological ambiguity. None of the people working in the newsrooms in many region or any other place know what's going to happen the next in the journalism industry. And existing financial models, for instance, advertising. Everybody says that advertising is great, advertising is important, but to be honest, advertising is not going to save the journalism. The pie of the journalism, or the pie of advertising in journalism is decreasing year by year. And in the end, we are going to see that advertising is not the solution. So big news companies or public broadcasters are kind of being replaced by startups. So startups are these little initiatives or entrepreneurial outlets, and they are replacing the newsrooms as we knew it. So of course there are still big mainstream newsrooms, but most of the newsrooms in many regions, in many countries, are either closed down or get bankrupted. So the problem about this is there are too many classical mainstream type media, maybe more than the society was demanding. So that is why it is not sustainable. So editorial jobs, on the other hand, are in decline. So most of the communication faculties are educating dozens of journalists. Maybe every year, thousands of people are graduated from journalism departments of the universities worldwide. So the first question is, do we need these many journalists? And the second question is, what kind of quality sets these journalists should have? So I have been working on the qualities or skills that journalists should have in today's newsrooms. And I have made some field research in different geographies like Bosnia, Turkey. Now I'm starting here. So all I see is the demands of the people who employ journalists or demands of the people who read newspapers are different from what we are offering or what journalists are offering to the employers or the readers. So there is a new working regime as well, which is in the financial heart of the journalism's crisis, which is precariousness. So freelance journalism, it's in rise. Of course, in some countries like Norway and Sweden, it might be better. You keep your independence, you are working as if you're a company, and there are too many interestingly good sides of it. But we know that in most other parts of the world, which don't have this kind of idealized union rights for freelancers, etc., it is just used to exploit and oppress journalists in a more aggressive way. So there are too many challenges that we can look at in journalism industry. But first of all, privacy concerns are really today in terms of the sharing of the news. You know, most of us are sharing news digitally, and we are disseminating the content somehow. Now, for journalists or for publishers, it's a big problem how their content is kind of being disseminated. And it is so hard today to understand how your content is disseminated. What are the feelings of the readers and this kind of stuff. And also, there is another problem that we all know, which is fake news or the post-truth regime that we are experiencing right now. According to a research by Reuters Institute of Journalism, 75% of the people believe that publishers and 71% of the people believe that platforms like Google and Facebook have the responsibility about fixing the problems of fake news and unreliable news problems. So there's a kind of distrust crisis in addition to the political, financial, and technological crisis that journalism industry is going on. There are some other statistics here. Some of them are relevant, some of them are not. But in order not to lose time, I want to skip this one. So there are still opportunities, especially as long as people in their 50s or 60s are alive. Television is going to remain alive as well. But yeah, of course, it's in decline. But somehow it's a generational thing, and television is still providing a good characteristic as a medium for news media. And Americans and Europeans, for instance, they would like to see fewer online news videos while podcasts are becoming a thing. There are some trends and opportunities which are waiting to be kind of followed. So this was a general overview about the journalism industry today. And what about the financial crisis itself? So that which is our main focus, because we are going to focus on financial crisis, and then we are going to find solutions. So after positioning fake news, political problems, and technological problems, I think that in the core of all these problems, there is something else, which is financial crisis. So employment and human resources is part of it. The quality of employees, the working regime of employees. And the second part is subscription and advertisement revenues, which are not providing good statistics these days, especially in this region or in countries other than some Northern European or Western European regions. So also there are some changing trends and emerging technologies which cause this. For instance, oligopolization of Google, Facebook, and this kind of networks, but we're going to come to that. So here are some statistics about the newsroom employment in US. This is a Pew Research. So in 9 years, from 2008 to 2017, we see that newsroom employment in United States market, which is one of the most successful markets in the journalism industry, has dropped by 23%. So this rate is much higher in underdeveloped industries or some democracies which are going through problems. Of course, in US, the problems about unemployment or layoffs are mostly about the financial stuff, while in countries, in MENA region, for instance, political oppression, media ownership, and this kind of problems are causing a lot of pain for journalism industry. So media outlets that define themselves as newspaper or news givers are damaged the most by the financial crisis of the media industry. In a bigger sense, for instance, BuzzFeed is part of the media industry, while BuzzFeed News or New York Times is the news media. So if you are working for a classical content production website which creates quizzes for teenagers, it is more possible that you can sustain your life, you can keep on living. But if you are working in New York Times, maybe you're luckier, but what about people working in some local newspapers in US or in Lebanon? Do they have the same opportunity? It is much more possible that they're either going to lose their position or their outlet is going to be shut down in short notice. So there are some other figures regarding the employment. So it reduced from 71,000 to 39,000. Newspaper publishers are damaged by the crisis the most, and there are layoffs in the digital-born news outlets as well. It's an important thing. So most people think that the crisis of the industry, as I said before, is about the transition from traditional to digital, and traditional jobs are in decline, or people who are working in traditional newsrooms are losing their jobs. But it is not the reality, because as you can see, people who are working for the digital newsrooms are also losing their jobs. So newsroom employees are more than twice as likely as other US workers with college graduates, but they make less than most of the people who are graduated from universities. Is it the same for all the regions, I guess? At least that's what I know from the countries that I've worked on. And journalism education, on the other hand, is extremely expensive, despite the standards that we provide, or weight standard that we provide after the graduation. So, in many newsrooms, according to studies that I looked at, I observed, I analyzed, there are some problems about the precariousness in newsrooms, which are journalism in terms of employment level is in a really bad situation. And from digital publications coordinator to an intern, precarious is effective. For instance, you can be CEO of a media company, or you can be editor-in-chief in a news organization. But as soon as you're fired or you lose your position, you never can say that I'm going to be employed really easily with the experience I had, especially in the MENA region. Especially if you lost your job due to some political errors or this kind of stuff, yeah, it's another problematic thing. And there's another thing, which is some NGOs or internationally backed organizations unintentionally contribute to the precariousness. How? For instance, I'm coming from Turkey. I'm a Turkey-based academic. So the problem about Turkey is, our government likes to shut down media and imprison journalists. But there is another thing that we should know about Turkey. There are a lot of NGOs and international NGOs which are investing on Turkey in order to save journalists from the bad situation they are in right now. But most of the investments they made are completely unsustainable. What I mean? I managed a couple of INGO or NGO-backed newsrooms. And the problem is you cannot work with a reporter on a full-time basis, which is one of the most important things for quality journalism, according to many studies. And somehow this INGO back, for instance, you create a newsroom as an association, a Guardian Foundation comes, Heinrich Böll Stiftung comes, or Fred Reber Stiftung comes, they give you some money, and they want you to spend it to support journalism in your environment. But you know what happens? It only makes the problem of precariousness deeper and unresolvable. So that's why I prepared this presentation, which is how can we stay in the limits of professional journalism, the journalism business, journalism industry, and let people know how can they still be professional journalists rather than being part of some charity or party-owned media. So, pass this. There are different types of getting money in journalism, how to make money, monetize. So 4 different categories are as follows: advertising, subscription, grants and funds, crowdfunding, and donations. So I think that you are familiar with all these terms. But I'm going to start with a question. Please raise your hands. How many of you pay for your news? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. It's so few, like 25% of the people in this room. And you're here for a media literacy program. So don't you suspect that not paying for the news is killing journalism? Don't you ever think that if you are not paying for something, you're either the product itself, which we can talk about in the surveillance classes, or you are somehow exposed to propaganda content? So proper journalism is like a quality or branded cloth that you buy for yourself. But we don't buy journalism. Who buys journalism? Who buys the efforts of journalists? I'm going to say political parties, advertisers, and this kind of stuff. So if these actors buy journalism, it is going to be so hard for journalism or news outlets as a product or as a business to survive this distrust crisis or the financial crisis of journalism. So let's start with the advertising in the market. First of all, I'm going to explain 4 different categories and situations in these different categories of revenue making. Then I'm going to come up with some case studies from different geographies. In 2017, according to eMarketer estimates, digital advertising in US market grew to $90 billion with an increase from $72 billion. As you see there, the desktop and digital advertising was dominating the advertising revenues in 2011. Hey? Okay. In 2011, it was dominating somehow. But we see a rise here, right? So how many of you are familiar with technologies like Google Analytics or Yandex Metrica? So if you are familiar with this, or if you're working in a newsroom, in most of the modern newsrooms, in the heart of the newsroom, now we have big tables which are showing the real-time statistical data about how many people are visiting your website at that moment and what they are reading. But it is not limited to what they read or what they see there. It is also about how they access to your website. Do you know why? Because it's important how they access. For instance, if I access from an iPhone, or if I access from Huawei, Android, Samsung, it tells a different story about who am I. So today, digital advertising has changed a lot. So does the nature of digital journalism. How many of you read your news through app of these news organizations? So, it's good. But how many of you click on something that you see on social media? Maybe all of you, because you can do both. So that's a big and a very big problem, since it is so hard to understand for us, or news outlets, what we are selling or whom we are selling to. That's why there are a lot of surveillance mechanisms working in the background of the news websites that you are visiting on a daily basis now. So let's continue with digital and non-digital advertising revenues. As you see, there is a rise in the pie of the digital advertising since 2011. Now we are in 2019, which means that digital advertising has got much bigger. Do you know why it is important? It is important because the myth regarding the death of the traditional media is now being really experienced. We are now experiencing the death of the newspaper as a material, as a hard copy, as we know it. So it is being somehow replaced. So banner ads, which are the ads that you see on the right side or the top side of the website, they were seen as the largest segment of the market or digital advertising market in 2017. So how many of you use ad blockers? Yeah, it is few actually. In the afternoon, you will all start using ad blockers in our digital security workshop, and I'm going to explain you why. It's a problem as well, because especially in Europe, US, Canada, or this kind of market, more and more people started to use ad blockers, which means that you cannot monetize the visits of your customers, which means that journalism, which is providing free content on the internet, is dying. It's a slow death, but we all watch it. We don't do anything about it, especially as journalism scholars or professionals. So there is another monster. Dr. Gretchen King mentioned Facebook. Google and Facebook are believed to be some monsters that eat the revenues of the news media or news industry. Here are some statistics about who gets the biggest pie from display advertising revenue. As you see, Facebook, Google, or Twitter, Amazon, Yahoo, Verizon. So while these platforms are seen as sources of news, they are the biggest media planning agencies or marketing agencies or advertising agencies that you can ever see. Google is a really big advertising platform, and it is the core of its character. Facebook, the same. And they are taking most of the revenue away from you. All they do is driving user data and manipulating it and using it. So that's all, okay? So then we come to subscription. So subscription is another thing. So you can subscribe to a newspaper in a digital way or in a traditional way. So it can come to your apartment, someone can deliver it to you, like in the films of US media industry or something alike. But it is so rare that especially people in their 20s are subscribed to a traditional newspaper these days. Mostly people tend to subscribe to digital stuff. But still subscription is something very, very European and very, very Scandinavian. And it is a really big problem. The average number of people paying for online news has edged up in many countries from 2017 to 2018, with significant increases coming from Norway, Sweden, and Finland, which are some of the wealthiest countries on earth. And Sweden and these countries have small number of publishers, and the majority of them are relentlessly pursuing a variety of paywall strategies. So they don't offer journalism for free, like most of the outlets in Lebanon, Turkey, Jordan, Egypt too. So that's the problem. That's the core of the problem. It is not only about what you do. It's not only about what you publish. It is also about what you show people and what you offer people and what do they have to do to access the content that you provide to them. So 2017, significant increase in subscription in the US and UK market is another phenomenon. So you know this post-truth crisis and fake news crisis, right? Everybody's talking about it. Trump came, Brexit passed, and a lot of stuff happened. Democracy is in crisis. And Americans are crazily buying newspapers these days. So the British. Guardian and New York Times are experiencing the best times of their digital sales rates thanks to Trump or thanks to Theresa May, Boris Johnson, or this kind of stuff. So while the financial crisis is going on, the political crisis that the world is experiencing has been turned into an advantage by some of the leading actors of the market. So most of the people here are coming from MENA region, where our governments are not the ideal, right? And where our democracies are mostly failing, which mostly don't exist in an ideal way. So we need journalism, that's true. And our leaders are not better than Trump. Actually, at least myself, Turkey, I'm coming from Turkey, so Erdogan is much worse than Trump in my opinion. But newspapers in Turkey are experiencing a kind of hazard. Why they cannot turn this into profit? That's my main question. Why? Why none of the newspapers in your countries are open to paid subscriptions? Why they're just offering free content? Because
they are propaganda bulletins. They are party brochures. They are not proper journalism pieces. That's my political statements. And my academic statement is about the news value, about the click value, and about the strategies that they follow while marketing the content they produced. So, looking at the European scale, a research on pay models of the news outlets in Finland, France, Germany, Italy, Poland, and United Kingdom, which are really different countries, by the way. UK has its own media system. Finland has its own media system. France and Italy, on the other hand, they are more like Mediterranean media system, according to Halina Mancini, which may be categorized in the same category with the most of the countries in the MENA region due to their polarized understanding. But still, 66% of newspapers in these countries operate a pay model. So it is a really interesting approach. Aren't we paying to the newspapers because we are poorer than these nations? Is that the case? Because it doesn't seem to be the case. Because when I go to market in Beirut, I see that most of the stuff I buy is as expensive as the stuff I buy in New York. So why Lebanese people don't subscribe to newspapers while New Yorkers or Norwegians or Swedish people do? Is that because some specific problems such as sectarianism, people buy the party newspapers or this kind of stuff? Or is it because we are lazy and we do not demand journalism as we see it anymore? So is it just a form problem, or is it about the content? It's a question to be answered. So 71% of the weekly newspapers and news magazines operate the pay model in these countries, and all broadcasters offer free access to their digital news. This includes both private sector broadcasters like RTL in Germany and TFL in France. So public service media, of course, you are paying tax for it, is open. But, for instance, you cannot reach services of BBC if you're coming outside, if you're clicking from outside from the country. So there are too many stuff still that you should do. And looking at only these news organizations who operate a pay model, the average price for the cheapest available monthly subscription is 13 euro. 13 euro. It is nothing actually compared to the stuff that you buy outside, like 5 manus or this kind of stuff. And we, as the Middle Easterns, we don't pay this kind of money for our newspapers, while we pay a lot of money for many crappy stuff. So you can look at some other. These are the access types or subscription models that are seen in the European scale. For instance, in terms of newspapers, 34% of them offer free access, while 41% of them offer freemium. Do you know what is freemium? For instance, some of the content, or most of the content is free, but some contents are behind the paywall. So you have to pay for some of the contents. And there is also something that we call as metered paywall. It is another thing. Metered paywall either means that after reading certain amount of articles, for instance, 5 articles or 6 articles, your access to newspaper is deactivated by the newspaper or the host, and they say you that you have to pay from now on. But there's another rising model, which is another form of metered paywall, which looks at how many times a content is seen, and according to the popularity of the content, it puts it behind the paywall. We are going to see it in case studies. And there is hard paywall. Hard paywall is the digital content you cannot see even a hint about without buying it. I think it is the most fantastic type. you are very confident about what you are providing to the people, you have to use this hard paywall content. So, as you see, in digital-born news outlets, 97% of them are providing free access, while in total sense, 54% of the news media is free access. It's European scale. It's European study. If you look at the MENA region, the figures are much lower. So does the quality. So another thing is grants and funds. I know that most of you have relations to NGOs and this kind of stuff. So NGOs, startups, and news collectives apply for a lot of funding. So you can either apply for funds as an individual or as an organization. It depends on the nature of the funding that you are applying to. And there are some cases where the grants have been turned into the threat for the existence of these news outlets. As Dr. King proposed, revolution or good or revolutionary journalism cannot be funded. I think that's true. Because in the experience of Turkey, European Union and US Embassy or this kind of international actors which are funding newspapers or news organizations in Turkey are really hesitant about certain type of stories, for instance. They limit. So they give you money, that's for sure. They give millions of euros or millions of dollars every year to the democracies in decline or developing democracies. It is how the Western democracy sees you, as a charity. Of course, they give a lot of money. We are thankful for that. But when it comes to the use of this money, what's happening? Oh, don't do this corruption story. We don't want our embassy to be targeted. Oh, don't do that. Don't do this. And it is somehow turning only into a new way of cultural imperialism. And I think that, I propose that, we have to find a solution for that. We cannot be stuck with these NGO funds. We have to provide our own funding. That's why I have too many crowdfunding related experiences here. So platforms like Patreon, Kickstarter, Indiegogo seem to be on hype in many ways. Journalists from different parts of the world are using Patreon-like platforms in order to fund their journalistic work. The most important part about Patreon is it is open to everyone. It is not like a technology that you should buy or a script like paywall, because I'm going to talk a lot about paywalls. But for an individual blogger who has, for instance, 10,000 of followers, it is hard to monetize his or her content. And it is hard to build a paywall, especially in the countries that don't allow technologies like PayPal or this kind of stuff. And most of the people don't trust that much to individual businesses while giving their credit card details or digital payment details. So while we are talking about paywalls, instead of paywalls, maybe we can depend more on platforms like Patreon in order to save our economy. So Facebook and YouTube's donate buttons will create good opportunities for journalists in near future. So have you ever donated to anyone in Twitch or Facebook or YouTube? So you will. That's where it goes. In the end, we will all be donating. We will all be buying. It is the new trend. So maybe you are not on Twitch. Is there anyone on Twitch in this room? So do you know what is Twitch? Twitch is a gamers platform. People play their games there, and you watch them playing. There are a lot of people who make thousands of dollars every month on Twitch. And do you know what they do? They just play games and make jokes about it. And likewise, YouTuber journalists or podcasters are putting putting their content on Patreon, and they are putting it under a kind of paywall, which is a member-only or subscriber-only content. So through it, many good investigative journalists or investigative journalism platforms are creating really interesting works about, I don't know, corruption, migration, and too many dramatic problems that we are experiencing in the world right now. So donation culture is somehow spreading. And what about the technological dimension of the crisis that we are experiencing? So we know that Facebook and Google are not the best friends of the journalism, and platforms have a determining role of dissemination of the thing that we know as fake news. And also there is another thing. Have you ever searched for a story recently, for instance, have you looked for that of Mursi on Google? What are the first results that you see? You see New York Times, you see Guardian, you probably see Washington Post, Wall Street Journal. It's either American or UK, right? So, of course, these news companies are complaining a lot about Google. But at the same time, algorithms created by Google are serving to their interests in the best way possible. So now we are talking about echo chambers. Now we are talking about a lot of stuff. In 2010s, before Arab Spring or the protests in a region, everybody was so optimistic about the future of the internet, decentralization, how internet is going to contribute to democracy or this kind of stuff. And platforms were seen as tools of disseminating democracy or liberty or individualism, equality, or this kind of values. But today, the algorithmic capitalism turned into a really big disadvantage for both activists and journalists. So the problem is, while everyone is accusing Facebook or Guardian, Facebook or Twitter for fake news, we are leading them into a way where only really mainstream and really institutionalized platforms, newsrooms are going to survive, while our independent newsrooms are not going to make it to the finish line. So you complain about fake news, you say that, no, Facebook is showing alt-right content or Trumpist content or this kind of stuff. And Facebook is changing its algorithms. But your Lebanese or Arabic website is not shown in Google results anymore. So it is another problem. So most of the newsrooms, therefore, are trying to get direct access from their computer, from their consumers, rather than getting access through social media or the search or keyword-related traffic. We want to, we as the news publishers, we want direct relationship. And it's possible in the age of the internet. That's why it is so scary to see this research saying that most of the people today are reading news through their WhatsApp. So you share news via WhatsApp as well, right? Because according to Reuters research in 2019, most of the people, especially in the oppressed democracies, share their news or consume their news through the thing that we call as dark social, which is the social media which cannot be publicly analyzed or publicly visible. So it is a problem for news outlets too. So we would like to have a direct relationship with you, consumer. So both AMP and Facebook Instant Articles. Do you know what is Google AMP? AMP. AMP is like a design or a model that Google created for newsrooms or for media outlets to show their content in a faster way. For instance, When you click on Daily Star Lebanon's website, it opens in, for instance, 3.6 seconds or 5.4 seconds. If they had a Google AMP, it opens in 0.3 seconds or 0.4 seconds. It's likewise in the Facebook instant articles. If you have an agreement with Facebook in terms of instant articles, your content is opened on the Facebook, the website itself, and people can view it from there. It is much easier to access. So it may say, as a customer, it may seem to you as if it is a big advantage, but in the business side, it is the worst thing that can ever happen, because our direct access to you as media provider is completely cut. Facebook and Google is dominating it. And how many of you use these news aggregators? Do you know what is a news aggregator? Platforms like Bundle, Flipboard, Apple News, or any other RSS stuff. They are really popular as well. And they don't pay newsrooms too. So the crisis is getting worsened by the technological platforms and the oligopoly they created, because they are dominating the field that they are active in. So they should step up. They are stepping up the battle against misinformation and disinformation. But what about the closed networks, community groups that we have just discussed? So the fake news problem, as we see it right now, is becoming a bigger and bigger problem, and it is this problem of distrust is turning into another thing. So, what are my solutions, or what are the models and cases that are used in different countries in order to resolve these financial problems that I have mentioned? So, there are three different categories of models that we're going to talk about. Some of the models are responding to more than one category. For instance, developing better subscription models, developing better community relations, turning donation campaigns and crowdfunding into an opportunity. So these are the solutions people mostly use as newsrooms. But I will start with the Wall Street Journal case, in which both subscription and the community management. Do you know what is journalism, community management in journalism? For instance, some newspapers, there are too many cancer patients around the world, right? And health pages of the newspapers are read a lot because our new doctor is Google, right? So some newspapers turned it into an advantage, and they created closed groups and open discussion groups about the news that they provide about stories. So this is community management and how it works. So the Wall Street Journal introduced a new comment strategy. So do you like commenting on news? Through Twitter, through Facebook, through other, people like it, especially when it is a kind of sexy thing that you can comment on, like a leader that you hate or leader that you love, or there's something polarized about the content that you see, you love to comment. But, you know Wall Street Journal, newspaper of the elite people of the earth. So they introduced new comment strategy to drive a higher quality of debate. Because CEOs are reading, CFOs or politicians or decision makers or determining actors read their newspaper, and they made sure that who are going to comment on stories. So they reduced how many articles it opens for comments and put them all behind the paywall. So if you are going to comment on Wall Street Journal, you must be paying for Wall Street Journal. Do you know why? So if you are commenting on New York Times, if you are commenting on Wall Street Journal, actually you are buying visibility. There are too many people who became visible to many other individuals in the society through comment part of these newspapers, especially in the ones that have some niche audiences, like financial Financial Times or Wall Street Journal. So they made commenting for paying members only, and stories that are open for audience posts are clearly marked. For instance, when you go to their webpage, you see that there are some signs in the post where you can comment. So the thing about it is they are trying to create an understanding of community, which is the soul of new media. Today, we consume and we create as communities. Of course, we are not communists or we are not in the ideal way of production. But the thing is, we are so closed into our echo chambers and this kind of stuff. And through this, Wall Street Journal or many publishers alike are bringing you together with the people that look like you. It is bad in political sense, but it is good in terms of business because you are paying in order to become part of an elite society, community. So there's another thing I would like to propose. How many of you ever heard about WhatsApp groups that you can be part of only if you pay for it? Do you know about this kind of groups? There are a lot of groups like that, right? Business people, or there are too many things. I don't know, there are porn stars using this kind of stuff as well. But the thing I'm talking about is more professionalized. Some people, some business people, open this kind of groups, and you have to pay thousands of dollars to become part of these groups. There are some mail bulletins, newsletters that you can be member of only through paying. So what happened after they introduced this strategy? First of all, the number of people reading comments has increased by 5%. And the number of people posting, liking, or replying has also gone up more than 5%. The people who comment are younger and more female skilled than before. So the community has changed, the people who comment has changed, but also there has been an increase because you made comments a product. You made comments something that is part of the experience again, like it has to be. So another newspaper, Swedish newspapers, Dagens Nyheter, it means today's news. And they say that there are more than one way to build a paywall. They created a meter where readers can access 3 articles a week. And it accounts for 10% of the title's conversion to subscribers, which is, for instance, in this week, I clicked to Dagens Nyheter's links on Twitter for 3 times. 4th time I click, Dagens Nyheter tells me that you have to pay for it now. And the outcome of this strategy is 10% of raise in the number of subscriptions. So a premium model where 2 or 3 daily lifestyle articles are for subscribers. So even if you paid, click it for the first time, for some specific articles with specific focuses, for instance, something about how rich kids of Instagram are living, or this kind of stuff, some fancy stuff. And they're putting it behind the paywall for everyone. So it becomes a thing. For instance, in a society like Sweden, a discussion or a deep investigation about activities of Swedish army in the other countries might be a good story, and people are volunteering to pay for it. And the articles that reach a certain amount of traffic in the first 3 to 4 hours go behind the paywall. I think it is one of the best paywall strategies that journalism outlets can develop, because if your story has been clicked for 1 million times in 10 minutes, it means that it should go behind the paywall, because it is something. Of course, I'm talking about an ideal environment where people are not just copying and pasting our content. So we need a lot of copyright laws and this kind of stuff. And there are too many ethical discussions that we can open. If journalism should be public and open to all because it's public information for public good, blah, blah. But I don't believe that. Because people are paying for everything, and they are not paying for the information that they need. Of course, we are paying taxes to the public broadcasters, but what are we getting? I don't know. It's another democratic problem, actually. So another thing is the Guardian case. So now they have accumulated more than 650,000 paying members worldwide. And in US, they have as much, especially after the rise of Trump in the US. The Guardian, as a UK-based publisher, publishing in English, became more popular than ever. Do you know why? Because the day Trump elected, the day before Trump was elected as the President of the United States, only one newspaper, one mainstream newspaper, predicted Trump victory. That's how polarized and I think in this trust crisis, media system or news outlets in US are. So people in US are now looking at the Guardian, a news outlet outside the country. And this global impact is going on everywhere. Of course, too many governments have some investments in other countries. Deutsche Welle, BBC, and this kind of outlets have multiple language broadcasts. But what really matters here is somehow you can turn crisis of other countries' politics into an advantage too. So that's what Guardian has done. So there's another Zeitung, a Swiss news publisher, Neue Zürcher Zeitung, is betting on email newsletters. How many of you are subscribed to an email newsletter? How many of you read that? Okay, it's the same, it's good. Because most people just subscribe to them and don't read them. According to MailChimp statistics, average number of people open their news letters are around 25%, which is really few, but it is still a thing. So this 200-year-old German language publisher currently has 21 email newsletters, like Politico. They have multiple newsletters too. And their the most popular newsletter is their daily briefing. And according to them, the newsletter accounts for around 8% of the traffic of the site in the morning time. And open rate average is above 30%. So 22% was MailChimp average. Sorry, I'm fact checking myself. And at the end of 2018, the publisher had 156,000 subscribers, which is really a good figure compared to Swiss news publishers. So there's some extra stuff. For instance, the Times of London and the Sunday Times have been using machine learning to better understand the wants and needs of their readers. For instance, they have a self-learning algorithm which serves subscribers kind of content most relevant to them. For instance, if you are reading stories only about Los Angeles Lakers, they show you stories about Los Angeles Lakers. It is so understandable. Most of the outlets now do that. But as most of the newspaper designs or digital news outlet designs are really stable and they are not that dynamic these days, they don't have this kind of algorithmic quality. As I don't have a lot of time, I'm skipping some of the stuff. For instance, TechCrunch has spent nearly 15 years covering the technology and startup worlds, and on February 12, Extra Crunch, a subscription product that cost $15 per month, was opened, and subscribers started to subscribe a lot and a lot. So this freemium stuff that you get extras is becoming more and more relevant. So Politico has some stuff, but I would like to spare some time for the questions. That's why I'm passing. The Sun has a kind of loyalty program where it looks like a subscription program, but it has 800,000 members. So some of you are coming from the countries which has as much population as United Kingdom does. But I don't think that any of us are living in a country where a newspaper has 800,000 subscribers or members for their loyalty programs. So that's the problem. So my last examples are from Turkey. 3 different journalists. So he's a really prestigious journalist who cannot find a job in Turkish mainstream media anymore. And he opened his own video-based news platform. And now he is making around $6,000 in total, only through Patreon revenue, which is a really big and good amount in Turkish media standards. Likewise, Uzunoglu, who was a radio programmer, which was not well known, and now on a daily basis, he is making a kind of video and podcast show in live sessions, and now he has 610 backers on Patreon. He did not publicize the revenue he makes, but he is the record breaker when it comes to that. Also, Cüneyt Özdemir, another former anchor of Turkey, he's now producing vlogs from Turkey and from New York, because he's not in Turkey anymore, and he has 259 backers on Patreon. So the main outcome of the presentation is we should pay for journalism, that's for sure, but we need to create models for our viewers, our audience, and we have to make our content relevant for them to pay. Thank you, and I'm going to take questions if you have some. Okay. Please. Arabic or English?
I am going Arabic. في الكثير أول شيء أنا شاكر لك اثنين. أوكي. تيست.
I'm not hearing yet. You speak. Okay.
أوكي. في بعض الدول ما عندها مشكلة أساساً في القراءة. مش قراءة الصحف، القراءة بشكل عام، يعني نسبة قراءة الأطفال بالوطن العربي بشكل عام متدنية. واحد يترجم له بالإنجليزي زي ما خلاص. في بعض في الوطن العربي بشكل عام نسبة القراءة متدنية لدى الأطفال، وهدول هم زبائن المستقبل للصحافة. فكيف بدنا نعالج هاي المشكلة؟
So the first thing is the changing consumer behavior, and I think that, like in the case of YouTuber journalists or podcaster journalists, like in the case of YouTuber journalists or podcaster journalists, I think we can change something. For instance, I mentioned the platform Twitch. None of you, maybe only several people here knows about Twitch, but it's a wonderful platform to catch teenagers or children and catch their interests regarding news media. Why a journalist shouldn't play FIFA 2019 while he is talking about what is happening in the country or what happened today? So this kind of stuff might be relevant in order to attract them, because we know children and we know what their passions are. We just have to change the way that we behave. And you should be sure that they are more open to donate than we as the adult people are.
So my question is about the backers on Patreon or maybe on Twitch as well, because I'm a little bit concerned and wondering how much transparency there actually is about those backers and their interests in donating money to certain, especially social media stars that are, I don't know, journalists in a political way. And is there, for example, some rules on Patreon that provide a minimum amount or a minimal amount of transparency so that you actually know who is funding those rising journalists?
So the thing here is if the journalist himself or herself does not publicize who is funding or how much the funder is paying, it is so hard to understand who this person is paying for. Of course, there are too many surveillance technologies today. For instance, if you open a Patreon account with your Gmail, which has your name and surname or personalized telephone number affiliated to it, of course the government is going to resolve whom you are supporting. But normally, if you have an anonymized account and if the publisher does not publicize it, in your banking details, it doesn't show the government whom you supported. It just shows you paid some amount of money to Patreon. So it is not riskful to donate to a kind of dissident journalist in your country or a dissident activist. So that's the thing I know, but in surveillance or cybersecurity workshop, we can discuss it later because there are too many things you should do to avoid this kind of stuff. Yeah. Anyone else? Another thing?
So I had a question about the method of making people pay to comment on articles, because I was wondering if you take this method to finance journalism, if this method of only allowing people to have their voices heard if they are able to pay for comments, if that isn't kind of undemocratic in its basis.
Yeah, okay, so the others can comment on it on Facebook or Twitter. The thing is, you're selling a prestige. Actually, I'm not the biggest fan of capitalism or this kind of models, but we have to sell our products somehow. For instance, you cannot just go to Ferdinand and have a beer for free, right? You can buy it from the market. So it's the same way. You can still drink the same beer, but it's also about where you drink it, whom you drink it with. So you are paying more for instance, baba ganoush in some restaurants than other in order to seem more prestigious, not because it tastes better. So that's the same thing, in my opinion. I know when it comes to democracy or public speech or echo chambers, it's problematic, but journalism is in a really deep crisis that I don't think that this kind of stuff are going to hurt us that much. There are too many other channels of discussion. And people who are discussing on Financial Times, they cannot say democracy, you can be sure. So, okay, yeah.
رح احكي بالعربي. اوكي هلا انا كنت عم بحاول معك احلل ليه احنا مش عم ندفع مصاري ليه مش عم ندفع مصاري للشكل الجديد من الاعلام اللي عم نتعرض له. بتذكر البدايه الاعلام كان ورقي، فالفيز كانت قليله، بمعنى انه احنا كنا بندفع عشان حق الورق والطباعه اللي كانت الجرايد بتدفعها. بعدين طلع عنا نوع جديد من الاعلام اللي اعتقدنا، وخاصه لما طلع عنا الساتلايت، انه عن طريق الدعايات، يعني احنا بدنا مشاهدين عشان يجونا اشخاص نعرض دعايات وعن طريقها احنا بنحصل مصاري. بعدين وصلنا هلا لمرحله الاعلام الجديد. هلا بالشرق الاوسط يمكن احد الاشكاليات انه احنا صفى عنا الاعلام المستقل، او بنحكي بنوعيه منيحه، صفى عم بعرض كونتنت بيشبه الصحافه الصفراء كمان، والصحافه الصفراء عم تاخذ من هذا الاعلام اللي هي معتمده على اشخاص اللي عدد الفيورز الاكثر، الدعايات الاكثر واضافه لانه طرق الدفع، احنا كثير من الاشخاص بالشرق الاوسط، يعني او بدي احكي عن تجربه الاردن، ما بنستخدم طرق الدفع الالكترونيه، او الجيل الجديد يمكن اكثر بيستخدمها من الجيل الحالي، بس لساتها يعني مش طريقه موثوقه، او كل شخص عنده كريدت كارد يدفع عن طريق الفيزا، هذا شيء مش كثير متوفر عندنا. فبس يعني عم بحاول احلل معك، اعتقد زي ما انتم كاعلام او كصحافه عم بتواجهوا مشاكل، كمان المتلقي عم بيواجه مشاكل بشكل الميديا اللي لازم يتعرض لها، واي نوع من الميديا اللي بدي ادفع له مصاري.
Of course, it depends on your personal use. But you said that, for instance, you don't use credit cards for buying stuff or things like. but you have an iPhone or Android, right? And in order to use an Android phone or an iPhone, you should have your credit card identified to the Apple Store or Google Play Store. You have to. You cannot have an account like that. It's impossible technically. So it is easy to make a purchase through it. So we find excuses for ourselves about not paying. But look at the people. They're paying for dating apps a lot in order to be seen more. They're paying for services that shows them who viewed their profile last on the Instagram or stuff like that. They're paying for this shit. So why wouldn't they pay for something that is really valuable? And what your statement was wonderful. You said that the newspapers, quality newspapers of the past, turned into tabloids. And the solution I propose here are going to make them credible once again. Because it's not going to be about cost per click or cost per view anymore if we start paying for the newspapers back. So it is a kind of mutual understanding thing. So newspapers are going to provide quality product and we are going to buy it. So I'm offering a shift in the understanding of journalistic product. That's all. Okay? Anyone else? Okay. Sorry, we can discuss later. Thank you. Bye-bye.